In the frozen heartlands of Russia, survival was never about burning more fuel. It was about making every piece of firewood count. The heating method explored in this episode allowed households to stay warm through brutal winters while using a fraction of the wood consumed by modern stoves and fireplaces. This was not folklore or luck. It was the result of a stove design refined over centuries, tested by climate, scarcity and necessity, and so effective that modern heating science still struggles to surpass it in real-world performance. Why Russian winters forced a radically different heating philosophy. For much of Russia, winter temperatures remain below freezing for months, and firewood has never been an unlimited resource. Villages were often remote, forests could be far away, and transporting fuel was labour-intensive. Burning wood inefficiently was not an inconvenience, but a threat to survival. Russian builders understood that constant feeding of a fire wasted heat and labour. They needed a system that captured nearly all the energy from wood and released it slowly over time. This pressure produced a heating solution built around thermal storage rather than continuous combustion. What the Russian stove actually was and how it differed from modern stoves. The traditional Russian stove, often called the pechka, was not a metal box meant to radiate heat quickly. It was a massive masonry structure built from brick, clay and stone. Inside, a complex system of flue channels forced hot gases to travel long, winding paths before exiting the chimney. Instead of sending heat outdoors, the stove absorbed it into its enormous mass. Once heated, the stove released warmth steadily for many hours, often an entire day after the fire had gone out. Why short, intense fires replace constant burning? The key hack was burn strategy. Russian stoves were fired hot and fast, usually once or twice a day. This high-temperature burn ensured complete combustion, extracting maximum energy from the wood and minimizing smoke and soot. After the fire burned out, the stored heat continued warming the home. Modern stoves often smoulder for hours, wasting fuel and producing creosote. The Russian approach turned firewood into stored energy rather than an ongoing expense. You know, thermal mass actually tripled the effective life of firewood. It's really the secret that modern systems, well, they just don't fully exploit. The stove itself, in a sense, became a sort of heat battery. Thick masonry would absorb energy that, otherwise, would be lost straight up the chimney. Because the heat was released slowly, indoor temperatures stayed stable, instead of spiking and crashing all the time. A household that might burn several loads of wood per day in a metal stove could honestly survive on just a single, carefully managed firing in a Russian stove. And over an entire winter, this translated into, well, dramatic fuel savings. So, why does modern science still struggle to beat this design? Well, modern heating science excels at efficiency, at least on paper, measured in things like combustion percentages and emissions. But what it often fails to capture is lived efficiency. A metal stove may achieve high burn efficiency, but it cools rapidly once the fire dies out. Forced air systems, on the other hand, deliver heat unevenly and honestly require constant energy input. The Russian stove, though, integrates combustion, storage and distribution, all into one system. Its simplicity really hides its sophistication. Engineers can model it, sure, but replicating its performance without that massive thermal mass, that's still a real challenge. Let's talk about how the stove shaped daily life and survival routines. The Russian stove wasn't just a heater, you know. It was used for cooking, drying clothes, baking bread, and, well, even sleeping. The top of the stove stayed warm long after firing, making it a safe place to rest in extreme cold. This multifunctional role reduced the need for separate energy sources. Every log burned served multiple purposes, which in turn further extended firewood supplies. So, how can modern builders and survivalists actually apply this knowledge today? Well, recreating a full Russian stove does require quite a bit of skill and, honestly, plenty of space. But you know, the principles behind it are adaptable. For instance, adding thermal mass around modern stoves can dramatically improve their performance. Using brick or stone surrounds, masonry walls, or even large earthen benches gives the ability to store heat much more efficiently. Burning hot, clean fires for shorter periods is another key. This reduces both fuel use and maintenance. And by designing flue paths that keep heat around longer before it vents outdoors, we can really replicate the original logic behind these ancient stoves. Even small changes, you see, move modern systems just that much closer to this proven model. So, why did this method disappear outside of cold regions? Well, the Russian stove fell out of favour not because it failed, but really because it was heavy, permanent, and, you know, a bit slow to heat up at first. Industrial societies started to prefer quick warmth and more compact appliances. Urban housing and standardized construction just left little room for these massive masonry structures. Convenience, in the end, replaced conservation. Yet the knowledge survived in rural areas, even if it was largely ignored by modern design trends. The Russian stove, honestly, reveals a lot about forgotten energy wisdom. It reflects an understanding that energy efficiency is not really about speed, but about control and storage. It shows us that burning less fuel does not mean living colder. Instead, it means using heat intelligently. This lesson, I think, applies far beyond just wood heating, offering insights into how buildings can work with physics, rather than fighting against it. So, why does this knowledge remain relevant today? Well, as energy costs rise and resilience becomes more important, the value of systems that deliver comfort with minimal input only grows. The Russian stove proves that low-tech solutions can, quite often, outperform high-tech ones when they're designed around real conditions. It's not merely an artifact of the past, but really a benchmark that modern systems still strive to reach. If this exploration of historical heating wisdom has, deepened your understanding of how people once mastered energy scarcity, do consider subscribing to In the Beginning and share this episode with fellow history enthusiasts and survival-minded viewers who appreciate solutions refined by centuries of real-world use.